Hello, everyone. This is the Broken Christian Man podcast. My name is Scott. The show is about what it's like to be a Christian in the real world. Topics that we may or may not agree on, but we still need to talk about them to find a path forward and to better understanding each other so that we can live more Christian lives. If you're interested in this kind of a show, tune out to the world, tune in to what we're talking about, and let's see if we can influence each other in a positive way. Welcome to the show, everyone. I hope everyone had a safe and happy New Year's celebration. And I was starting off 2024 traveling home from seeing my family for the Christmas holiday. And I got to thinking, I witnessed an interaction between a father and a child in the airport, and it really made me think of our relationship with God. So, setting the stage, we're all cranky when we're traveling. My wife and I have some of the more challenging times in our relationship when we're traveling. There's no doubt about it. We're cranky, we're argumentative, we're touchy, we're tired. All of the above that make for great relationship testing. And I seen a father, and he was, trying to guide his son into the area, into our gate that we were flying out of. And, the child was fussy and crying and not happy, didn't want to be held, didn't want to walk, just doing what children do whenever they're upset. And so anyway, the father, the son says, is, I guess, motioning that he wants something to eat or he's hungry. So the father gives him, what looks to be like a sippy cup of some sort or a packet of juice or something like that, something that he can hold and maybe get some relief for thirst or hunger or whatever it may be. And he takes a couple sips and he throws it back at his father. And his father says, hey, let's not do that, and then the boy wants it back. So anyway, the father gives him it back and he takes another sip and he throws it back at him. And then he kind of laughs about it because he thinks it's funny that he's throwing his food at his father. And so then his father says, hey, if you do that one more time, I'm going to take it away from you. So we have fair warning. And for the third time, the boy does the exact same thing. And his father takes it away, and then he throws an incredible tantrum in the airport, embarrassing everybody because although he got his way in the beginning, their father warned him. And then he gets mad and throws a tantrum and screams about it and drawing a lot of attention to himself as if, he's the one that's been wronged in this situation. And I find that we are that way a lot of times with God. We get mad or we get upset whenever things don't go our way, or we throw a fit, we blame God, and a lot of times for our own ignorance. And we get mad, and I want to paint kind of a picture of this because our God is a loving God. I get a lot of grief from people, he's make-believe and all these other things. People, they don't read a Bible. They don't really know anything about the Bible. They really don't know anything about God. And they base their experience of God off of a man sitting in a pulpit that has more than likely abused or perverted the word of God for their own self-interest. And most people, are more mad with religion, primarily organized religion, than they are actually God. And to the point where you don't really see Christians too often getting really upset about wrongdoing as much as you do non-Christians. And I'm saying that in a broad brushstroke. There is the exceptions, but if you adhere to the teachings of the Bible, crap's going to happen. There's no doubt about it. Things are going to go wrong, and you're supposed to deal with them with grace, according to the Bible. And I'm not going to go and hunt those up maybe another time, but the reality of it is the Bible commands us to be better. And so one of the things that is interesting is the Israelites, they acted a lot like the boy. I mean, Christians, I pointed at Christians because there are times that Christians get all mad. They get their faith, or I correct myself. They get with God and they expect life to be great, and it's really not. But yet God does a lot of the things behind the scenes for us, and we're really pretty thankless. We don't thank God for the good stuff. We only get mad when the bad stuff happens. And so a perspective of this is, let's start in the Old Testament, and we will start in Exodus 16. And so let's paint some stuff here. Not to go through the whole history, but at this point in time, the Israelites have been delivered from slavery, been delivered from slavery. I can't talk this morning. From Egypt. God has went through the 10 plagues of Egypt. Pharaoh has relented. The Israelites have escaped. Pharaoh reconsiders his decision. We have the parting of the Red Sea, where the Israelites escape. Mind you, seeing the miracle of the Red Sea and seeing that God closes up the Red Sea on Pharaoh's soldiers as the Israelites have made it across on dry ground. So they're out in the wilderness now, and the Israelites were in the wilderness, which is really the deserts of that area. It's thinking that they're around Mount Sinai, but not super sure. But that's the thinking, and they're held out there for 40 years, largely so that they can become closer to God. And God always sends us to the wilderness to become closer to Him, but also to strip away, our impurities and help us become wiser and closer to Him. So in other words, God gets us away from the world into the quiet place. And even now you have the quiet place. You could go off into a room in your house or whatever, but God wants us to get off into a quiet place with Him. And wants to commune with us and wants to become closer. And I've often said, and it's often said by other people, other Christians, that if you get into God, God will get into Him. If you draw closer to Him, He'll draw closer to you. And so that's initially what's happening. Now, in this case, also, God is also purifying the Israelites because they did practice and get exposed to the pagan worship and the pagan rituals of the Egyptians. And so that's also, God is also planting His seed within them, but also in His own way reaping out the weeds to help, prosper belief in Him and to show His glory. So one of the things that happened in the wilderness was that the Israelites were given manna to eat. Manna would have met all their nutritional needs. It would be like a dew in the morning on the ground. They would go collect it. They would eat it. They would be good. Well, after a period of time, the Israelites get grumbly about it. And you can read about this in Exodus 16. It talks about the manna and how it came about. But it also talks about the grumblings that the Israelites, it starts in 16:6 of Exodus, where they're aggravated because they had this manna to eat every day, and they're sick of it. And to the point I want you to put yourself in this situation. You've just been delivered from slavery, right? Slavery, hard work, labor-intensive slavery. You have no rights. You are not allowed to do anything of your own accord. You are a slave. And the Israelites say they want to go back to this. They want to go back to being enslaved because at least they got different kinds of food. And they grumbled against God. Now, if you experience slavery, and I know we all can't speak of things until we're in them, and experience the kind of slavery it was and what they were subjected to, you would say, let's just assume that it's harsh. You'd want to go back to that for food. You would get manna, and you'd be free to do whatever you want with whomever you want. But you want to go back to that over food, and you're upset. God is providing for them. They don't have to want for anything. They've got good water and they've got manna. And they've got their freedom, that they would choose slavery over that. And, I think a lot of times we choose sin over God. And let's face it, sin is slavery. We become a slave to it. I'll tell you, I will give you one of my wrestles, and that is food. I love to eat. And I'm right now, I'm in a journey to try to cut some pounds off of me. And it's a struggle. And here's the thing, I'm not a super big dude, but I'm about 15 to 20 pounds heavier than I really should be. I really could use to be a little lighter, and I feel it in my joints. I feel it in my back. I feel it more as I age. But man, I get into that coffee and creamer. Food is a lot more. It's everything you eat, everything you drink, everything that you put in your body. Man, I love to have some cream with my coffee. That is for sure. I love sweets. I love ice cream. I love all of it. And I've really had to learn how to deal with that in a moderate way. And it's hard. Even in a moderate way, it's not even being fully taken away from me. But it's hard because once you get a little bit of it, you want to keep going back to the well and get more. So slave can truly be a sin. Even the slave of our pleasures, it can be a sin. Sex can be, or not sin, but can be slavery. You can become slaves to a lot of things. Gambling is fun, but it also can make you a slave to it. You can also become addicted to it. Sex is fun. We all like that sex. I'm sorry, everybody likes sex, but you can become a slave to it. You can get caught up in habits of masturbation and just bad sex practices, multiple partners. Well, all of these things have negative effects on your body, whether they're good or bad. Too much of anything is hard on the body. Down to drinking. Drinking bad, but it's hard on your liver. Liver cancer is a thing. Overeating. Yeah, you gain a lot of weight. You can become diabetic. Once again, you're taxing your kidneys and you're taxing your pancreas, and you become diabetic. All of these things have negative consequences to the body. Although they are good and can be intended to be good, they still can have negative consequences. Even down to having righteous opinions. We can be overly righteous sometimes, and we can push people away from God. But I've said it. Inflicting the Bible too much on people can have negative consequences, because the Bible is it's food for your soul, and we can inflict it too much on people. We can persecute, we can Bible bash people, we can shove it down their throat and push them straight up away from God. Down to even if we've got the wrong pretenses of the Bible and we think we're preaching good and solid sermon because of something somebody's told us that makes kind of sense, and we just didn't go into the Bible and test it. Now we're beating somebody up with the Bible, and that's not God's intent for his word. And so, like I said, here's the Israelites. This is how good God is. He's providing food for them. I want to move to the parable of the prodigal son. You can find this in Luke 15:11-32. Here is another Jesus is telling a parable to say how good God is. This is New Testament. So we have an Old Testament and a New Testament talking of God and His love for for Christians. All right. So here's God, and He's talking. I'm not going to read the whole thing because these are long, and you do have to put in some work to read them. Not a lot, but a little bit much to read for a podcast. So anyway, in the story of the parable son, here is a Israelite father. He has two sons, and one son wants his inheritance early. And so he goes out into the world. And this is a story of overindulgence. The son has gotten quite a bit from his father. He goes into the world. He goes and he spends it on women and gambling and parties and good food. He's basically overindulgent in every sense of the way. And that's what happens when we don't have something on us to temper us in the world. We get overindulgent by nature. If you make a lot of money, a lot of people make a lot of money, they're never happy. They need more money to sustain that love of money. If you're a sexual being, you want more sex and more sex and more sex. If you get addicted to drugs, you need more drugs and more drugs and more drugs to sustain the high. The world is basically one giant high, whether it be food, whether it be sex, whether it be drugs, whether it be money. We're, as human beings, the human condition is always striving for bliss. We want something that makes us blissful. And nobody is immune to it. Something that just came to mind is the opium wars in China. If you go to China, the value system is very controlled by the government, but the people in China are very disciplined folks. You can see this all throughout the Asian culture is discipline. And, before they're communists, before the communist takeover, they were a very religious society. Zen Buddhism is very common in parts of China, and Taoism and Confucianism. All of these are moral codes. They're not that any different really than the Bible in a lot of senses. Moral code, but it's a worldly moral code. The Bible has a worldly moral code that also coincides with the biblical point of view of us getting close to a Father in heaven who loves us. The Bible takes it a step forward. It takes it into the afterlife and living with God after we leave this earth, where everything in Confucianism, Taoism, and Zen Buddhism is really about a worldly cycle. It's about doing good on this planet only. And so they're a religious culture. And we need these moral codes. But even still, coming back to this opium wars, the British introduced the opium for free trade into China, where they were a very locked country before that. And people got addicted. They started chasing the dragon, is what they would say. They're chasing the dragon, which is that high that opium gives you. And it destroyed their society until communist China and I forget the dictator at that time. It was before Xi Jinping took over, and he basically had his own war on drugs, and the opium war stopped. So even in a disciplined country like Asia, they still had issues with drugs. Now it's practically non-existent. They manufacture a lot of things to send over into the United States, But as far as it's a lot better, a lot more disciplined society. But they have those cultural moral codes that you have to live up to. Like I said, they have the morality, basically the morality police. They police everything about their citizens. And here we have this prodigal son. He spends everything to the point where he's eating, he was talking about him eating with the pigs, and they used to have these little pies. It's disgusting. But for the pigs, it's the leftover food, it's grain, it's rotted, it's horrible. And he's looking at this because he spends all the money and has to take the job of a pig keeper. So here's all of this happening. He's down to his last. He goes finally to the point where he's like, I would rather work for my father as a hand, a working hand on the farm than do this. So he goes back and he offers himself basically up as a slave to his father. And his father sees him in the distance. He meets him. He gives him a ring. He clothes him in the finest robes. He kills the fatted calf to bring his son home. And that's what God wants from us. Here's what we have a picture of God that we detest. We get so mad at God. We blame God for everything, but here's a God that does love us and is thinking about our futures in heaven with him and trying to live a life that's better on this planet. So here it is. This is the picture of God you have, is this dad who greets him back. Now, granted, he has another son who is jealous, rightfully so. That represents the world. God's love is all-encompassing. Though bad things happen, he still loves us. Though we get mad at him and smack his hand away on the things that he attempts to give us, maybe it's not as good as we want, but he's trying to give us something and we smack his hand away. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy in that regard. So anyway, rightfully so, the other son is jealous, and that is the world. We are jealous of everybody. We see it so often in this. We cannot help but envy everybody who has something in our line of work, and that's the world. And so now I want to venture into the world because this is a tale of two different perspectives. Is we have God's love, two different stories in the Bible of how he provides and how he loves us. Now we're going to come into the dreaded story of Sodom and Gomorrah. So Sodom and Gomorrah, this story can be found in Genesis 19. And 1 through 29 tells the story up to the story of its destruction. And like I said, I'm going to paraphrase. This is another one that's long enough that it'd take a little bit to read. Basically, God sees the wickedness in Sodom and Gomorrah, and they talk a lot about homosexuality, but really, in retrospect, it's talking about sexual immorality. Homosexuality just happens to be a part of that. Really, God hates sexual immorality in general. Once again, we're coming to flesh. We're talking about flesh. Fleshly desires are worldly desires. All right. So anyway, God gives him 3 chances. Abraham pleads, if you can find, I think he starts at 50 good men or something like that. Then God says he'll spare it. God could not only find one good man in the whole town, but after a series of, Abraham asking him to please reconsider, and he only finds Lot. Well, the story goes that God sends 2 angels into Sodom and Gomorrah to warn Lot and to ask him to leave before God destroys it. And anyway, the men come to the town square. Lot finds them, tells them it's not safe to be there at night. And so what it is there's a strict rule of hospitality in the Middle East. And that is that, people traveling through would sit in the town center or the town square, and people would offer them lodging. so that they didn't have to sleep in the cold at night, because although it may get warm in the Middle East at night, it's a desert area, it gets very cold at night. And, it's to offer them lodging and offer passersby food. And that's just the rules of hospitality in that area. Well, Lot takes these two men, and they are angels or messengers of God, and they're going to tell him. Well, anyway, day falls, and the men of the town, and particularly it points out the men, and the reason why is women had secondary roles in the culture. I don't advocate it, but it's just how it is. Women had secondary roles in the culture, and men were primarily noted in the Bible. They want to have sex with these men. These men want to have sex with the men, which are actually angels of God in human form. And Lot is like, no, don't do this evil thing. And they're threatening to bust down his door and rape these men. This is the world and the wickedness that we can succumb to. And anyway, Lot says, no, I'm going to offer up my daughters. Don't do this to these men. And I don't advocate this, but like I said, women were second-class citizens in the time. And Lot is, offering his daughters up to be raped. It makes me sad, and I hate that, but honestly, that's what's happening. This is not a representation of God. This is a representation of man. All right? Man, the men of the time were pig-headed and offering up their daughters to be raped, not God. This is not something that God is endorsing. The point is that this is what the world is like and can be like whenever we don't have a moral code, when we don't have God in it. So anyway, the men, God's angels, the representatives of God, blind the men so they can escape. This is a representation of what God is. He saves Lot and his daughters and his wife from being raped. All right, so let's really look at that. And let's focus in on that. It's not God's fault that the world is in this disarray. And then they escape, and there's more to that story. You can read it for yourself. But yeah, God destroys Sodom and Gomorrah, two different cities. Sodom and Gomorrah is not the same place. It is two different cities. God destroys them with fire from heaven. More and more, I don't know. I'm not up to date on it, but I've seen several documentaries where they believe they found Sodom and Gomorrah, and it shows signs of extreme heat and extreme searing as proof that these cities existed. Now, the second story I'm going to point to you, this one hurts my heart even more, but we go to Judges, and this is about a man who pursues his concubine. All right, so she is the woman who is going, his concubines were women who were this there for sex and for producing children. Men having heirs was huge and very important in ancient customs, not just Middle Eastern customs. It is a worldly thing. All over the world, having heirs, more importantly, male heirs, because you want somebody to inherit whatever you have as a legacy. And so anyway, this man goes to pursue his concubine who cheated on him. This can be found in Exodus 19. And anyway, once again, he goes and finds the woman. She cheats on him, and she goes to her father's house. And in this area, this is talking about a Levite country. Some backstory on this is God has turned his back on the Israelites in this story. Also, they're under a pagan king who is not adhering to God's law. So this is a pagan culture, no God's law, no nothing. So anyway, once again, this guy wants to get out of town. He does not want to be in this town, but the father-in-law insists. And so they stay the night. Then the men of the town, they come and they want to rape him. They're knocking on the door. Once again, we're talking about men wanting to rape men, basic sexual immorality. And so anyway, the father of the house says, don't do this. I have, and so anyway, I have a daughter. So anyway, long story short, the man gives them his concubine. They rape and brutalize her all night. And in the morning, she is so weak, she crawls back to her father's house after this atrocity has been done to her, and she is on the step and she dies. The man takes this woman back home, and this is really not great, but he cuts her into portions, and he sends a piece of her body with a note warning all of these areas of the what they've become. And I'm probably just going to stop it right there, because it's a sad story. Every time I read it, it makes me cry, literally, because it's horrible. But this is a representation of what the world becomes whenever God is not affecting it. It becomes chaos. So what have we learned? We've learned that God is all-encompassing love with a moral code, and then when we succumb to the world is chaos. It's absolute disarray. People give in to their every desire, and you can see this today. You can see this in any culture that is absent of God. They don't respect life. People go crazy with their morality. Right now in the United States, I would say the inmates are running the asylum. We're crazy from the government down. And the thing about that is we have more and more government control. If you have government control, then you're losing godly control. You know, the thing that was really interesting that I read in What Good Is God by Philip Yancey is a statement that he made about his time in China, where China is an atheistic nation. But the interesting thing about it is that Christianity is not about government control. It is about self-control and accountability. So instead of the government telling you what is good and what is right, you are finding a moral code. Jesus even says that I've not come to abolish the laws that are in the Old Testament. I've come to write them on your heart. So in other words, you shouldn't be going by written law. You need to be looking at the moral law. What is good and true? Moral law. It's riddled all throughout the Bible that when the world becomes control, governments come into control, we lose our morality. And right now it's been going on all throughout. Some good, some is good from the way the United States is going, but a lot more bad than good, in my opinion. Because our kids are more disrespectful than ever to our parents. You know, think about this. Our kids want. If they don't get it, they do things. I have a friend. He's tries to raise his daughter the best he can. But because there are rules and she wants to do what she wants, and she's not of age, she's not old enough to be making decisions because she doesn't agree with it. She went to live with the other parent who doesn't lead a godly household at all and is a drug addict. They would prefer to be under this uncertainty to do what they want than have a stable household. But the difference is rules. And this has nothing to do with Christianity and everything to do with order versus chaos. We would much rather choose chaos than order. We feel like we're entitled as a world. It's really come around to that. But you take these impoverished countries, what's everybody trying to do? They live in chaos. You take the immigration crisis that the United States is now having. Why is that happening? Well, because the countries that those people are coming from sucks. There's rape, there's murder, there's just, they have no control over their food, their water, their bodies. They're subjugated to the world. And we think, oh, well, that has nothing to do with God, but it does. It has everything to do with God. Because if the individuals that were inflicting this kind of monstrosities on these people to make them want to leave were godly, they wouldn't be hurting and raping their women and, starving them out and taking everything for themselves. That's what happens when you don't have God. It's all about getting mine. Me, 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 me. Where God calls us to be communal, to be a community, to love one another, to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's a biblical thing. Honestly, the do unto others bit is a part of every moral code, no matter what the religion is. But you get the picture is that you take God out of everything and you get nastiness. It's just nastiness. If you look at Rome and how sexualized it became before its fall, the United States is following suit. But it's more than that. There are things that just absolutely don't make sense. When I went home, I'm not dealing with that in the state of North Carolina, but in where I'm from, they're dealing with a lawsuit because parents want the school to keep kitty litter boxes in the bathrooms for the children that identify as hats or as cats. Can you imagine this? Can you imagine that you identify as a cat and you want to poop in a litter box when you have a toilet that you can sit on comfortably and do your business? That is how far we are falling. That's how far we're falling as a society. I mean, sanitary standards. Come on, folks. I don't know how we can keep turning our eyes away from God when you have that. I would, come on. We have people identifying as everything under the sun. There are only two genders. Hate to say it. If you're a human species, you're either male or female. And I know some people are like, well, what about the people who are hermaphrodites that were born with both genders? Hey, I know anomalies happen, but that's not the normal. Most people is one way or the other. There are things where your body's different, but your soul is another. And I know I opened Pandora's box. Well, what if I'm a male, but I feel like I'm female? Or what if I'm female and I feel like I'm male, but I don't have that stuff? After you're 18, that's great. Really do what you want. I can't claim to understand it, but I can see where everything is went awry, where people are identifying, you have a man. I seen a documentary on this. The guy is like 40, 50, something like that. He's a full grown man. He's a big freaking man, but he's a baby. He identifies as a baby and he has a family that takes care of him. I'm serious. Here is a 45, 50-year-old man wearing a diaper and wanting a bottle and sleeping in a oversized crib. There's something wrong with this, folks. There's something wrong with this. It's undeniable. But yet we choose to hide our eyes from it and accept everything as normal. And I'm sorry, there are some things, if you're just doing something wrong, like for instance, everybody's cool with drinking, saying drinking and driving is bad. But if you identify as a drunk, okay, and then they say, I'm extreme for even bringing that up. Well, if you identify as a drunk, then it's normal. But you're hurting other people. And some people can say, hey, as long as they're not hurting anybody, who cares? But to some degree, all right, what about people who are anorexic or have an issue with cutting? They're not hurting anybody else, but they're hurting themselves. Well, they're not hurting anybody, but they're hurting themselves. What about getting that person help? When did we stop trying to help people, even if they're a danger to themselves? I seen an interview with folks that were talking about, they started out, they said, hey, what do you think about tattoos and minors? Every one of them in the interview, and maybe maybe it was edited. I don't know, but I can see this. I talk to people. Oh no, it's way too permanent. They should be waiting until they're 18 and they can make a more informed decision before they put ink on their bottom. Then they ask them about gender. Oh, well, that's different. If you are a male and you have your winky cut off, that's permanent. You can sew it back on. It never works the same. Sorry, there's too many nerve endings. It never works the same. Likewise, if you're a woman, do you know what they do for a woman to create a penis for her? They take all of her stuff and put it on the outside. So they take every component of the vagina and they put it outside to fashion a penis. That's permanent. If you put it back, it still doesn't work the same. Not to mention, that person, that woman in this position, can never have kids. Once that's done, even if reversed, their ability to have children is taken away from them. We've got to be better, folks. And a lot of people blame this on saying that Christians are bad. Well, no, they're not bad. They're just telling you something you don't want to hear. It's the same thing. People pick on Christians. They don't dare pick on Muslims that are telling you the same thing. They don't dare pick on any other religion telling you the same thing. So let's wake up. Let's love ourselves enough to give ourselves a chance in this world. Let's go away from the chaos. Let's start looking at moral laws. Let's start trying to be better as a society rather than just go on every other whim. Anyway, like I said, this is not something I hate. I don't hate anybody. I love you guys, and that's why I do this. It's not out of hate, it's out of love. Because I'm just as hard on Christians. I'm just as hard on non-Christians. I'm just as hard on any religion. My wife's family is Catholic. And although I think Catholicism is just fine in a lot of retrospects, there are some things wrong with it. Just like I pick on Protestant religions. Because anytime you get away from God and you get into man-made stuff, I'm going to call it. Anyway, I hope you have a great week. Happy New Year. I love you all. Think about these things and don't just choose a side. Listen to what's being said here in the Bible. All right. Have a great week, everyone. Well, that's all we have for today. If you could, please like and subscribe to the podcast. And while you're there, please give us a rating. Also, please check us out on Instagram under Broken Christian Man and also under Twitter under Broken_CM. Thank you.